Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey. Oh, I am not muted, am I? How's it going?
Good, good.
Going well here.
Let me send the update in the invite as well, so that more people can see it.
Oh, are we live? Hi, world.
Yes.
Nice.
Let's wait just a few more minutes, just in case people do want to join.
So while we're waiting, poll for the room. When I create a Helga plugin, it will serve some small lame purpose. Do you guys want anything in particular?
Say again, when you set it up, it does serve a purpose that you want to see if we have anything in mind.
Yeah, I didn't understand the question either.
So a Helga plugin, when you say something in chat, it can pick up on regular expressions or certain commands.
Right.
You guys have a suggestion command that we should use? We're gonna make one. So think about a favorite. If we want to make a new command based on an explicit command with arguments or regex or something. Think about it.
Like, how about suggestion ? Or something? Would that be one?
Yeah, so we could make it match the regex suggestion ? And then it would do something in chat back at us, probably.
Oh, okay.
What's playing on B985 right now? Yeah, and if you tell me how to figure that out, then we can do that, Rich.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we got quite a few people joining, so I guess you can go ahead, John. Richard said 1 second. Do you want us to wait, Richard, or?
We can, yeah, you pull that up, and we can just go with that, Rich, and just leave it in here, and I'll refer back when I need it. It's not going to be needed for a few minutes, but I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
All right, I think I'm sharing my screen. Hi, everybody. We're on tea time. I'm just booting up here, so pardon being a little slow here. So we are going to figure out how to make a Helga plugin. I don't have any slides. We're just going to go ahead and do it. So I have a template, a cookie cutter template that should help us in this task. Let's see. I'll pull that up as well. And similarly to what we were doing before, it's going to generate a lot of the plugin, including some tests for convenient testing for us. And we can just run talks, and or we can configure Helga to use this. And if you guys want to make a Helga plugin, then I can configure it to be used in our newspaper Slack, for example. So yeah, feel free. It's all in Python, so more Python happiness. And let's get to it. So I'm just gonna pretty much follow this. I already installed Cookie Cutter globally. So I'm just gonna cookie cut this Helga plugin. Let's see. And I might be a little goofy here because I'm using a new gadget I haven't really used before, window manager called i3. It's pretty awesome, but I'm not super accustomed to it yet. So let's see. So it's something like listen to some station. Maybe it can be, I don't know if we want to support other stations though in the future. So it's LSP related. I wonder if we should just say listen or what's playing. Maybe what's playing. So we're gonna name, this again takes in some parameters that we're gonna give it, and it will replace these things that are templated for us. So for example, when you say curly brace, cookie cutter dot plugin name, that will correspond directly to this plugin name that we're giving it right here. When we get done with this question template over on the left, it will produce a directory structure that looks just like this template. So I'm going to go ahead and click here so we can see a little further what we mean. So I will expect that there will be a directory named something like Helga dash what's playing. And then in that directory will be all this stuff. And then again here, the package, well, that's going to be the next question. That'll be replaced similarly. So it follows that pattern. And then inside these things, we'll see make file. This isn't necessary, but it will go in the files and replace as well. So it's just a template. It makes it easier. There are some other things it does, like make the tests work immediately. So there's just like nasty garbage right here that you guys don't have to do, that you can mock the Mongo client, for example. So hopefully it'll just get you started with plugins faster. And we should have a plugin done by the end of this session. So it went with what's playing. I'm going back over here to the left. It generated what's playing for us, and that looks good. That is a valid Python thingy. And what does it do? We're gonna request a radio station and see what is playing on a particular LSP station. I don't know if that's even the right, I don't know what LSP stands for. Richard, you can correct me and tell me how lame I am. About how wrong I am too. So we're gonna fill this in. It's kind of the same as the last one. So now we're gonna expect Helga what's playing is here. So here we have that basic that I was talking about. See, notice it replaced the curly braces here. And if we run tox, I'll just be bold and just run it right now. The goal is, if you run tox, it should run with passing tests already. And you have a very basic structure that's in this what's playing directory that you can invoke the command and it will pick something back. So while it's installing these requirements, I'm going to open up some of the code here. So we see what we're talking about. So we can see the command right now, how Helga works. If you use this @ command decoration, then what's playing. So in our case, you can say Helga space what's playing or exclamation point what's dash playing. Then it will follow whatever logic is here. So this is just a nice decorator for this function for Python. If you don't know, it'll just like wrap it and make it work for Helga land. And then we see that logic is immediately called here. So we can populate whatever's in here. So Richard grabbed us a cool endpoint that I'm opening in a different window. And it looks like it's nice JSON. Thank you for being awesome, radio team. And I'm going to search for how do we do this. So I happen to know that the requests library is like super duper popular. I always use it. I'm just going to use that because I'm lame. Let's go quick start actually. So to get the endpoint, I think we're just going to have to do something like this. And then I'll find his endpoint. And we're just going to do this station that he gave us directly. Let's see. Let me copy paste this again. And we can maybe change this or augment it so that we can get different stations. But this is what we have for now. So we're going to follow this endpoint. And then I saw that it gives us JSON, which I guess I'll pull that up over here. I don't know why I'm doing that on a different screen, so you can see what we're working with. Okay. So we'll expect something like this. So maybe, let's see, maybe we'll just do the artist and the title. And this must be a playlist, I take it. So we're gonna say, and then there's another thing that gets us straight to the JSON, I believe. So we're gonna say, well, shoot, I'm just gonna be really lame and return it like this. And you guys have to deal with it. So I guess I'll get the title this way. I'm looking over here for my format, what it needs to be as well. First result and the artist. I'm just going to dupe that. Oh. There we go. So we're just going to say artist, title. All right. I think that's it. So we have this down and a terrible M, which snuck in there somehow. I don't know why that is. That was dumb of me. We can't just do that. All right, that should be happier. We did not import requests. It's helpfully saying that I'm an idiot and need to do this. Are you happy? Are you pleased yet? Import but not used, we don't care about that. Okay, we should be good now. So we have to do another thing for the requirements, which are in the setup file. We have to just make sure that requests is added. So this is a library that does a lot of HTTP stuff. It's really super common. There we go. All right. So now if we were to run talks, I would expect that it would fail and say artist is going to be, well, either a Coldplay or probably by now it's moved on to something else. But we're not actually going to care that much about testing it. So in the real world, I would expect that you do something like mock the request so that you can always guarantee that you get back Adele. As far as this code knows, it's actually hitting the endpoint, but really you're supplying it. So look into mock. It's a pretty awesome library. Should be mocking a lot of stuff. It's amazing. But yeah, let's go ahead and run this. I think talks ran. Yeah, so this is back on the other tab now. It ran out of the box, the test pass. So now we're going to go back over here and see that it should have failed. And why does it say that? Because I need the request library installed. Oh, this is another funny talks thing. So talks already did its requirements, it thought. So I'm going to actually delete talks again. I know that's a little silly, but whatever. It's the fastest for this, I believe. So it's going to go back and install all the requirements. But while it's doing that, it's going to take a few seconds. Does anybody have any questions or statements? Or yeah, just general thoughts. Oh, that was pretty fast, actually. Psych, no questions. So yeah, so it expected hello world, and it gets back Franti awesome and say, hey, oh, that's a good one. So it actually hit the endpoint. And if I'm going to refresh over here just so that we can have some faith in me that it's doing that. Okay, so now we know that we're getting back the right stuff. And we just have to, really, we could publish this plugin. So I'm going to go to setup right here, all this stuff. If you filled everything in properly, then you should be able to just publish this to PyPy, which is like the NPM repo. I think we're a little more JavaScript friendly. And you can immediately say, I have it in the make file already. You can say make release. If I did make release right now, if I typed that, it would go to PyPy and we could download this package and it would be glorious. But we're not going to do that right this second. I'm just going to show you in Helga, and then we're going to be done, and that's it because we made our plugin. So let's see. So I have this format which is kind of goofy. So when I cd into a directory, I guess I can't. Yeah, you guys probably don't care. This is totally not related, but I'm going to show you anyways. When I go into a directory, I have overridden the cd command. Let's see, where is it? Here you go. So when you go into a directory, it will call a built-in. So you will move to the directory. That's what this does. And then if it has a .m file, it'll just run it. So there is a .m file here, and I activate my virtual environment. That's all that does. So that's why this appeared. And then since we're in that virtual environment, we can, here, I'll do some, this looks awkward, but I think it's the fastest way. So we're still in that virtual environment. I can say install this plugin. We're back in the plugin. Install this plugin into that virtual environment. Okay, should be done now. And we're gonna go here, CD again, so that it can be in the virtual environment. And I think, did I write a command for this? Did I do that? I did. Good job, me. And then I'm going to, oh, see, that's not good. I broke something. I feel like I just had this problem with Maurice. This is just a dumb Python problem I'll probably have to fix sometime. Oh, it's just called what's playing. Yeah, that sounds familiar. So this is the entry point. Yeah, this right here. So I'll have to fix this in my gadget. But this is how Helga knows where all the plugins are. And if this is supposed to be the command, if someone does a command what's playing, it should run this function. Well, this is not a function. That is just wrong. I guess I closed it already, but it's actually just what's playing. So we're going to do that. We're going to reinstall it, and then we're going to rerun Helga. She looks happier. She's less judgy. And I'm going to open, how do you even do this anymore? Nope, that was wrong. I don't even know what I just clicked. We're going to open, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to open Hex Chat. Yeah. I have a server running locally. And there's Helga. So let's see. What's playing? What's playing, Helga? Oh, snap. This is like a real Helga. Again, I could put this on our Helga for real in like 1 second. And here it is. I've never heard of this. I don't know what this is. Something really pithy, I bet. Like really deep and meaningful. Yeah, because I don't know any of these awesome people. But we'll just, we saw the other one was working, so I'm going to be lame and assume that that's working. So there you go. There's a working Helga plugin. Could potentially be on PyPy right now and potentially be configured for our Helga right now. You should all go make a Helga plugin right now. Cool. Yeah, that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
Awesome.
Yay. I will wait an obligatory 10 seconds longer.
Is there any way we can get that on actual, like a Helga in Slack or something, so we can play around with something like that?
Yeah. We can install this plugin, I guess. I could just put it on GitHub and you guys could check it out. Or you can follow this tutorial to make a new one. And you can just tell me. So there's another thing. Well, let's see. I don't know if I'm signed in here. Oh, wait, I'm already here. So there's we use for the newspaper Slack, we use Ansible for, no, I'm not logged in. I don't want to log in here. This is kind of a insecure setup. But we use Ansible to manage the Helga deploy for the newspaper Slack only. This is not the IRC one. I don't know how it's managed. It seems kind of obscure, however that's managed. But yeah, we can add it in any plugins that you guys make and you think would be helpful. We can do that very quickly. Yep. Any other questions? I saw, so apparently that was a commercial. Richard informs us. So I bet if yeah, there you go. There's a real person. That seems more like a thing. Cool. Steve Craig. Good guy, Steve, who I also don't know. Cool. Well, thanks, everybody. Gonna assume there's no more questions, or you can ping me in Slack if you have other questions. But yeah, get to it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. All right. So Susan was going to talk about a deployment process, and so will Carlos. Carlos also had a new suggestions about a new deployment process. So let's see what they have to offer. So Susan, go first. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So this will be sort of like a round table where people can contribute how they're doing it now, especially the radio team. Dan Cobb has worked with Syringera to put together a deployment process that will allow us to bypass SVN. And I'm going to put that link in the conversation for the Hangout. So you can take a look at that. This is a process that would allow us to abandon SVN and just use GitHub for all of our commits. It's not set up yet. It's a bit complex. You know, whether or not it ever actually makes it to fruition, we'll kind of wait and see. But in the interim, our free and paid newspaper teams are going to create we're still using GitHub for our JavaScript and our CSS. So we're going to create an interim branch called a sprint branch. And let's talk about that. It's not, the link that I provided in the conversation is like an intermediate goal. Here, I'll share my screen, sure. So this is the link that I posted in the conversation. And this is the process that would allow us to use GitHub for all of our commits for JPT files, JSP, any of the method resources that we use, as well as the JavaScript and the CSS. And this has not been implemented. It honestly will probably be a while before it gets implemented. But in the interim time, developers that are making commits in GitHub. So let me show you just a graphic. We have a newspaper repo called NP Paid in GitHub, and this box represents the remote repo. This is Susan's local branch, and then I will make a commit here, and I'll push that commit up to one or more commits up to the remote repo. Now, typically, I would make my commits, I would push them up, I would build my JS and CSS files, and I would push those JS and CSS files into the development environment for Method. And then I would test my code. Once I'm finished, I'm ready to send that code to QA. Then I would push my CSS and JS files to the QA environment. QA would test, the ticket would be accepted, and not until acceptance would I actually merge that branch into the remote repo. And that means that at any given point, anything in the remote repo is deployable, as long as I never merge my branch until that branch has been accepted in Jira, or in the past it was version 1. Everything in the remote repo the remote repo is deployable. So what happens if we add another developer to the mix? Like, let's say that Alan and I are both working on the newspaper free sites. So he's pushing commits. Now we have a problem because we can't merge the remote repo yet, because our philosophy is everything in the remote repo is deployable, and these tickets haven't been accepted. So we need an interim branch, which I'll call the common sprint branch, and I'm going to move that up here. Let's move this down here, and we're going to move this. We're going to move his local branch. And then this is a branch that we cloned off of the master repo, and we're going to use it as an interim master repo. We're going to push our commits to it, both Alan and myself. Let's move this over here. And so Alan's going to push here, and I'm going to push to the common sprint branch. And this branch will contain commits from various developers who are working on the same repo, the NP Paid. But we still would not merge any of our code to the up here until the ticket is accepted. Now, in a best case scenario, at the end of a sprint, we would do a deploy, and every ticket in that sprint would be accepted and deployed, right? So that we should be able to just take this one branch and we should be able to merge it, is what I'm thinking. Does that sound like a reasonable scenario?
So when you do a pull request, the pull request would be a request to merge into common sprints?
Well, see that, yes. So here's what I'm thinking. that when I do a pull request down here, excuse me, the pull request would occur here because I'm pushing my commits. I'm ready for a code review. So I'm going to issue a pull request against this branch. Now, once my ticket gets accepted, like my ticket's going to get accepted before Alan's. So here's what I'm thinking to make this work. What do I just merge? Alan and I both have to merge to this branch before our tickets get accepted, because the JS and the .css files, those have to be pushed up to the development environment and method. Alan's unaccepted changes and my unaccepted changes both have to be compiled into the same JS file to go up to the development environment. So we do have to, in fact, merge to this interim branch before our tickets are accepted, right? And does that make sense?
Yeah. And then would you be, once you merge into that, do you do a grunt or gulp push into a method and update the code and method?
In the development environment, yes.
And then would you do a commit, an SVN commit on that, or would you just leave it?
I would just leave it, right? Because you wouldn't want, there'd be no reason to do an SVN push because that's not the JS you're going to eventually push to production.
But here's the thing though, you do need to promote this code up to QA and possibly
right. Yeah, right? Exactly.
And so get accepted because you need QA to test it and everything. So
right. And here's what I'm thinking. You know, this is not an ideal situation, but I feel almost like the only way to make this work is if we just go ahead and push up whatever we build from here to QA for testing. So it will have some of Alan's stuff in it, even though QA is not testing his stuff. But, you know, we're trying to not overcomplicate things here. I'm thinking this process will work, and it's probably the simplest and the most flexible. So perhaps we move these files from the development environment into QA when a ticket in this sprint is ready to test. And like I said, some of Alan's stuff will go to the QA environment because he has some code in the JS file, even though his ticket's not yet being tested. And then at the end of the sprint, hopefully both Alan's ticket and my ticket were both tested and accepted. So in a best case scenario, this whole branch could be, a pull request could be made to the remote repo. And okay, so that's the best case scenario. And in the best case scenario, everything seems to, that all makes sense. Am I thinking correctly, guys? Because here's the issue. The issue is these two files, if we're going to push those two files into the development environment and QA is going to be simultaneously testing Alan's ticket and my ticket in QA, the code has to be there for both tickets. So that's the need for an interim branch, right?
Susan, I have a quick question there for you.
Okay.
So, when you say that you need an interim branch, why do you think that your code and Alan's code need to go at the same time? Are they totally related, or can they go?
No, they're not related. But keep in mind we have 3, sometimes 4 developers working in one repo. And we can't tell QA, hey, you can't test Susan's ticket until you finish with Alan's. The testing has to occur simultaneously in the QA environment, right? Because we don't have enough days in the sprint to be able to test everybody's branch completely independently in QA.
So if you have a common branch that can be deployed to development, then if it's ready for test, say for example your ticket is ready for testing, you could push it to dev and then you could push it to QA, but Alan can still work in dev all he has to do is just make sure that he has your changes in his branch. Am I missing some? I know I'm not very much familiar with the JPT concept and all that, but I think I'm missing something.
Okay. Mita, say that last sentence again. Could he do what?
Medini, by the way.
Medini, I apologize.
No, that's fine. People do get confused.
Right.
That's with M. Yeah. So I was asking if you could, why can't your code go first and then Alan can catch up?
Well, because let's say that we happen to finish our coding on the same day, and QA wants to test both tickets in the QA environment. So we would, both Alan's code and my code would be merged here, and we would push that JS and that CSS file over to the QA environment, right? Do you follow me? That's the need for the common branch, is because Alan's code and my code both have to be bundled into the CSS and the JS files so that QA can test both of our tickets on the same day in the QA environment.
Okay, sort of a release candidate.
What? I'm sorry, what was that?
I mean, you're treating your common sprint branch as a potential release candidate, and whoever makes change will just go one on top of another. But it's okay. Ignore me.
Yeah. What is? Okay. And what's the definition of a release candidate?
A release candidate is something a code, a bundle of code that is ready that is deployable to any.
Yeah. This is not deployable because it hasn't been accepted yet. This branch is not deployable until all feature branches that participate in that sprint branch have been accepted.
Yeah, kind of like a development branch, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, it's a development branch, a development / QA branch. I guess that's what we should call it.
And then once it's accepted, then we merge it to remote, right? We merge it to master remote, right?
Right.
Once everything in it accepted.
Yeah, and that's all fine and good. Yeah. I guess my question is, what happens if just a single ticket out of 5 does not get accepted?
Oh. Well, I guess we'll just...
do we just revert all the commits for that one ticket out of the common branch?
Well, if it was pull request merge, then we just revert the merge, that one commit that merged.
Yeah. Maybe that's the way we do it. We revert that one merge, but then everything else gets merged the day of the deploy.
Yeah. But so this is more like a development branch, and I don't think we have the concept of, or we're using the idea of release candidates. Medni, I don't think we're using that because everything goes into remotes, master remotes, and now master. The most up-to-date version of master is what gets pushed up all the way to staging and prod.
Hey, John.
Hey.
I like your input that you put in Slack, and I like the idea of a public-ish proxy. I'm just reading through the rest of the stuff that you wrote manually, only for particular proxies.
I'm going to blame Tim for the good idea, by the way, but go on.
And I see, and then Tim, I'm sorry, Tim, I guess you were the person that originally said this, and then John added some things to it. Yeah. Tim, yes, it says, oh, yeah. Okay. So, Tim, I'm going back up to your original comment. It'd be interesting to see if we could deploy your proxy on AWS, and then you wouldn't need to merge until a ticket is. I like that. Is that, I mean, is that something that's overly complex to set up? Or we're just looking for a quick and dirty solution until we get a more complex system that Dan and Surinder are putting into place? How difficult would that be to deploy a proxy on AWS?
And when you just say it like that, it'd be really easy. Yeah, we can set it up really fast. I'm thinking of if we can like provision something specifically for this use case really easily. I bet we could. I bet we could set it up really fast so that anyone can use it.
Okay.
Yeah. And for a one-off, oh yeah, totally. It would be very, very fast.
Okay, so can I set up a meeting for us to review that, the devs on the newspaper team with you and John would of course be there.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, that would actually be awesome if we could do this through a proxy. And we wouldn't have to merge any code. I don't know. I'm not sure how you're proposing to set that up, but yeah, I'd love that idea. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth exploring. For those that aren't kind of sure what's going on, there is a conversation going on in the Espresso channel on Slack, and the reason is that the room is full, so Tim can't join, so he can't talk, so he's just sharing his ideas in the channel. And one of the ideas was that we can set this up as a proxy on AWS, and that's what Susan and John are talking about. So yeah,
there's a project going on. I mean, there's a team that's put together. Richard is part of that group too. It's a Cobra team that's overlooking at, and Dan is part of that group too, basically looking at putting together a deployment process. Tim Willis is also working on a POC for Member Center to kind of and build a code pipeline on AWS. If there's a discussion and if there's something that newspaper team would like to collaborate and put together something, basically a code pipeline or a build process altogether, please invite me in that meeting and as well. And I'll also forward that to the other Cobra team members. And sorry to cut you off, Mason, but this is just a request. If you want, I can put together a meeting and we can talk further. And I have to drop off. Maybe Tim can join in and he can talk.
Well, here's an idea.
Yeah, sounds great.
How about we set up, Tim? How about you set up a good, presentation for next Espresso Talk in a couple of weeks, and then go through the full process of what you have set up for Member Center, and then we can continue this conversation then. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I may meet with Tim before then, just because we've got one or two devs that need to share code on the MP Paid repo right now. I was just kind of thinking of a quick and dirty solution that would.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe, Tim, that there is a quick and easy solution that we could implement right away with a local proxy using AWS. But yeah, so I may just set up Mason, we may want to have a quick meeting with Tim and maybe in Medini. Yeah, okay, cool.
Awesome, yeah, we can totally do that. I'll send everyone an invite to see if we can get together and discuss more. Cool.
Awesome, thank you.
Carlos also had something to share about a deployment process. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's related to this conversation. Carlos, do you want to? Susan, are you all good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Susan. Hey, Carlos, if you want to go ahead.
Hey guys, it's not related, but it is still part of the deployment process. So I guess can I share my screen on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So. Okay, so currently there's a team of a few devs working on the mobile first story page, and one of the tasks that we had was to kind of improve the performance of the story page, and through that process we identified that we weren't utilizing browser caching, and after having a meeting with shared services, we kind of came up with a two-part solution. One was that shared services would essentially, tell the headers or tell the browsers to cache our assets, anything like any CSS files or JavaScript files. And we, as the newspaper team, would version those files. You know, we looked into ways to version the files, and you know, there's people that append, you know, actual manual version numbers onto them. But we decided that we didn't want to do a version number, and I think that we decided to go with a hash of the actual, just a random hash to append to the actual files. And through some more research, we found, actually Dave found, a way to use gulp to create a hash of those files. So I guess I should pull up something here. Let's see, so we're actually using gulp rev, and if I could pull this up into, let's see, assets, common. That's interesting. Give me a sec. Running gulp push right now because I know that runs like a gulp prod build, and that's the only time that the actual hashing of the assets actually happen. So what I'm actually going to do is once I get that method prompt, I'll just exit out of it because I don't want to push up what I have right now. But essentially, perfect. Give me a second here, guys. What is this?
Is your editor called PHP Storm?
Yeah, actually it is PHP Storm, yeah. It's like WebStorm with PHP stuff built into it.
Okay.
So let's see. So I'm in the related box and I want to go here. And actually I was right on that file. I'll do go push again. And that was the only linting error I had, so it should go ahead and complete. So kind of already we see that this red manifest file was already created. And they'll start to see that some of the assets are actually going to start to change once this is done. And then I'll make sure to synchronize assets here. So let me just cancel out of this here. Okay. So what ended up happening is during the actual push to production, there's an additional process in the gulp file that runs gulp rev. And what gulp rev does is it actually creates a hash version of a file that already exists. So here's an example. We have app.js, and then this file is identical to app.js, but it has a hash. And that hash is actually based on the contents of that file. So if the contents of app.js change for any reason, then that hash will essentially change itself. The reason that we're doing that is because you know, shared services is setting the headers or telling the browsers to save the assets essentially forever. Every time we change the contents of that file, we'll be referencing a new hash, and the browsers will essentially be forced to re-download the new assets. I guess I'll pause right here. Anybody have any questions?
I have a couple questions. I assume shared services is just changing through Akamai, configuring the CDN. Is that true?
I don't actually know the
Yes.
exact process. Yeah, but surrender's
Yes.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
good.
Yes, that is correct.
Good. I didn't know if it was going to be some method thing. It sounded like that might be good for CDN. And secondly, are you guys using gulp concat as well when you're generating these hashes?
We are not. We use gulp concat for other things, but we don't. Like I believe gulp rev actually does the concat or the hashing itself. It has its own magic in its black box of itself.
Okay. Would you mind opening up the build really fast? Just
Sure.
to, I don't know your build just yet, but anyway, this won't matter at all. Like what you're doing is going to be like way better than currently, but with gulp, how it deals with the streams, if you're using stuff like concat, there might just be a super minor issue of that you would get a different hash even if nothing's changed, because concat happens in a different order. So you might get like file 1, then file 2 concated, and then it's all minified and all that good stuff. Or 2, then 1. That would be different, and you get different hashes. But this is like so much of an improvement that probably won't even matter at all. So that's all.
We do use concat because we actually do have to bundle. One of the other things that we did during the mobile first story page improvements was we like took theme.css and story.css, and we kind of combined them on a per site basis. So if you pull it in the assets now through the new build, you actually have a bundled story mobile and its hash, and that's actually the theme and the mobile version of that being referenced right here. So there is one concat that's going on, and that's going to be the theme and the actual story.css file. But to address your concerns, I feel like I went down the path and made sure that I was making sure that all the hashes were the concat were completed before any of the hashing actually took place. And I accomplished that by making sure that the hashing process itself was dependent on the entire build being completed before anything got actually hashed, if that makes sense to you.
It does. Okay, well, good. Yeah, something to keep an eye out for. Yeah, I would guess that if it's still just the concat that would trigger it, it might be a thing, but it's not a big deal. It's like so trivial for real. Yeah. So that sounds good. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. I tried to make sure I addressed a lot of the concerns. Like we end up going into the assets folder and deleting a lot of the files that are already there, just to make sure that we're uploading all the fresh hashes that are available. So I guess right now I'm going to move on to the GoPrev. The GoPrev file that's in the common folder now after you create the build, the Rev manifest file. So you can see here, it's essentially a JSON file or JSON object, and all it does is essentially maps one file to its exact hash version. So if you tell it you need this, it's going to output this. And that's essentially how that works. And then we upload everything. And what we do is we go in and we make sure we delete everything in the assets folder that ends with CSS, map, JS, and JSON. And after we wait for that process to complete, we essentially take this freshly new hashed assets folder that's inside of this build, and we upload it into method. If we look inside of the dev, or in preview dev here, and look inside of the actual assets folder, I expect to see a Go manifest file or Rev manifest file, because right now we're the people on the mobile first story page are the only people working inside of the dev environment. So, I can pretty much tell you for certain that this story.hash right here is going to be different than the one I have, because I've made local changes on my machine. That's essentially what we got. That's how we're breaking the cache. So to move on, how does method? Because once we've got the Go or the Rev manifest file inside of method, how do we actually read it from inside of method? And for this part, I actually ended up speaking with David from IDOS, and he said that the weather tag would be the best place to see how to read JSON. So essentially, I took that tag, the ideas from that tag, and I implemented it into another tag. And that tag is called, let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. So custom tags, and I believe it's called get hashed asset. And it is locked by me. So if I open it, essentially what it does is it takes the hashed asset and it returns it back based on And maybe this is not the actual file. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Because there's actually 2 tags in play right here. Asset hashing map, I'm sorry. So this is actually the file here. So this is the snippet of code right here that does the JSON reading of the file. So there's a decent amount of verbiage in here if you guys want to read it. But essentially, it creates a map of it. And if you ask for a certain file, if you create the hash map, you can say get, and then you say app.js. And this guy right here will return its hash version based on the asset on the rev manifest file. So essentially, you grab the actual hash map, you say asset hashing map, and then you pass in a value, and that value essentially becomes that hash map. And then from there, you can tell it to get the actual hash version of itself. What this get hashed asset tag does is moving on to the fact that we wanted to separate or not do this inside of either development or QA environments. And the reason that we did that was so that we didn't want to interfere with developers using the proxy and them potentially referencing the wrong hash file or a file that doesn't exist on their local machine and not being able to see their changes. So in this guy, we just do essentially a check for either dev or QA. And if we actually don't have that, then we won't hash it. But if you are not in that environment, then we go ahead and hash that file. So there's a few layers of separation in there for that. Then I guess finally, there's one thing that we demoed this over to Surendra and the shared services, and a few people were sitting in on that meeting, and there was a lot of concern about if this gets deployed at noon, and there's JPTs out there that are cached and they have references to old files that don't exist anymore, then we could see pretty big issues. So we've got a new JPT, and it's essentially a proxy, and it's sitting inside of, let's see, MP free, and that's inside of assets, or I'm sorry, not assets, but frame sets. And inside of frame sets, and then we have this asset version, and essentially it's literally just running as it outputs. It receives a few things, some params, asset type, asset path, and maybe an asset attribute, and it just essentially outputs that. And the main reason that we do that is because we can change this date right here for a certain release. And if we make this change and we commit it and we promote this file, what ends up happening is we can trigger the cache to break on the method side of things. And that will essentially not have us create or have a portion of our process be after we're done deploying, we have to request a new server or a server reboot. And that's essentially it. The only thing that I forgot to mention during this process, if this all gets approved and everyone says it's great and it gets deployed, the only real thing that'll change from what you as a MP developer do right now is that when you deploy to free sites, is like highly recommended, if not like just basically mandatory, that we start committing on the actual asset folder level. And the reason for that is because that way you can make sure that everything that's referenced in the actual rev manifest file is actually present in any of the promotions that go up. So that's about it. Any questions?
So, is this something we're going to implement on the paid sites as well?
I think if it goes well, I think that it's going to be something that is going to be implemented on paid and possibly on any of the other sites or other
Yes,
teams.
that is correct. That is correct, Carl. I know I've been told in one of the PWA team that is going on. It's just more of a same thing. We are planning to, once it is done fully in free sites, I want to implement this one in all the places. This will improve the system, like application front-end performance a lot.
Right. Yep. Sounds good.
Still have Sam. All right.
Yeah, Carlos, I don't know, like you can even do the versioning of the JPT using your the gulp process. You can somehow sneak into that process and add the version using a gulp into the JPT.
Inside of this JPT?
Yeah. You can put the JPT somewhere in your assets, like somewhere in your assets basically, or I don't know, like
yeah, I guess
can like put somewhere.
Yeah, this asset version can live in the assets here and then have it locally saved to commit it to Git. That's actually a possibility, yeah.
So is this going to be in place in development and the QA environment?
Well, I mean, when it gets in place, it's going to be in all of the environments. But what's going to happen is there's a GPT in there that kind of acts as a proxy between the asset hashing map tag and well, this is not a GPT, it's a tag, and then it's the get hashed asset. And what it does, it's going to go ahead and check to see if you're in dev or you're in QA, and it's not going to deliver you a hash version. And the main reason we want to do that is so that developers can continue to use the proxy, and they won't have issues where they are making changes, they don't see those changes, or they don't see the CSS because they're referencing a different hash.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really want to emphasize that there's this process makes me scared, because if for any odd reason we miss one of these hash versions, and we don't promote it up through the levels and it doesn't match through the rev manifest file, we could potentially be referencing something that doesn't exist or an older file. If the CSS is 404s, then we're going to get a really ugly site, and if the JavaScript 404s, then we're going to get a site without a lot of functionality. So that's essentially the biggest threat to this process, in my opinion. It's kind of a necessary evil, but it's important that all devs are very aware of it, and make sure that they commit at the asset level and promote at the asset level. And I know that there's potential for new processes coming down the pipe based on what Susan talked about. But for right now, I think that the best way to do it is to commit here and promote at this asset level. And that pretty much ensures that all the files will be brought up that are different. So yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover.
So Carlos, if we do a push to the dev environment by using, like on the paid site, well, let's just talk about the free sites. If we do a grunt push to push it up to the dev environment, we wouldn't have needed to do a commit yet, right, on the JS files?
Yeah, if you push up to dev, you don't have to do the deployment process.
Yeah.
Right.
So we can just preview-dev.site, our JS changes show up.
Right. Yeah, there shouldn't be any changes, but the only thing is that you can break the dev site right now if you don't push from the mobile first story page master repo that we've got going on right now. There's potential almost with 99% certainty that the site will actually break, simply because the head files are referencing the get assets files, and those files are referencing the rev manifest file, and I think that it could potentially break. breakdown if it doesn't return any information because that file's not there.
All right then. If there are no other questions, then I guess we're all done. Thanks everyone for presenting, John, Susan, and Carlos, and everyone else for participating. And we're at, what is it, 3 p.m. Eastern? So well, yeah, we took a full hour, and that was awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.